This is Andrea with Parking Lot Debrief. Okay. I'm here with someone I've been very excited to have on, and I'm sure others are very excited to hear from. I've got Tiffany Hill. From what? From all the things. We'll get into all the things that she's a part of, but yeah, I want to hand it over to you to do a short little bio of whatever you feel like sharing with folks about who you are.
Yeah, Tiffany Hill. Um, I'm a product of the DMV, that's DC, Maryland, Virginia, not so much Virginia. Born in the district, raised between DC and Maryland, over the line. Uh, and that's where I grew up. That's the community, the deaf community I know. It's where I cut my teeth as an interpreter. And fast forward to 2008, couple years prior, I went freelance. I was a staffer. We can talk about that. And I just didn't want to be a staffer anymore. And thought, if I'm going to make $10 an hour, I can make it on my own.
Yep.
So I decided to start a little agency, which I didn't do much with. It was just to be independent. And fast forward to COVID, I started having more issues with entities, and I just said, well, I can try something. Let me try to push my voice out a little bit. And so that's how I really got first choice interpreting up and running. And it's been a nice little what started like really started 2020 in the height of COVID. So when I rebranded and pushed, like I can do this. I don't have to sit back anymore and do just small things. Yeah, so now it's 2025. And yeah, it's been about 5 years of me just saying I can work on my own. And so first choice interpreting service, you can ask me the questions about that, but really I'm just an interpreter first and foremost. And it's been about, I started professionally 20 girl, in 2001 when I was finishing my program. So yeah, that's where I am now, 20, almost 24 years.
Wow. Still interpreting though? You still do some jobs? Okay.
Yeah, I can. I love it.
Okay.
I
Same.
really love it. Yeah. Am I more selective? Do I do less? Do I spend more time abroad? And yeah, because I feel like I can and I want to. Um, but yeah, it's a like my setup's here. So I'm still working interpreter. Yes, very much so.
Yeah, it's hard to not. Um, yeah, that's the first thing I was going to ask you about is first choice interpreting service. I onboarded with you all, I think, during COVID, which I'm sure helped become more nationwide, virtual. You can
Yeah.
contract all over the place. Um, but your agency feels different in the good ways, in the ways that you did what you wanted, probably molded and shaped by all the shit you did not want to do. Um, because we can and we interpreter run agencies have a vibe, but also like the smaller interpreter run agencies definitely have a vibe that resonates with me. And yours, I felt leaned more towards representation, diversity, very specific niche, customizable services, especially what it says on your website, but that you were selective of what type of contracts you were even going to take. Why don't all agencies do this?
Yeah, that's no, it's such a good question. I mean, I appreciate the love because I worked first and foremost, I've appreciated working with interpreters out in the world, just doing the work we do together, and then creating a space where they feel comfortable working with me and trusting me to do all the fielding, to ask the right questions. And like, it's not a thing of saying anybody's perfect. Every situation and dynamic is different. I learn something new every single time I'm in the driver's seat. Um, but it's a privilege to work with people who I also know who are responsible and assertive and proactive and self-aware and introspective. And
And you
so
got to
that was,
pick those people.
yeah, right,
Right.
exactly. So it's like, even now when I get applicants, I'm like, ooh, because it's
Hmm.
one of those things where I was asking people to come take these jobs because I knew you already, or someone else was like, oh, I saw you in a thing. And um, yeah, why they don't do it, I think it's a thing. It's this. You
Yeah.
can't afford to do that when you are busy underbidding contracts and trying to and talking about, lying about the staff that you have to be able to go out and fill these numbers. Like, it's not realistic, and it's very unrealistic when I think about how long it's taken me to get into a place where I feel comfortable as an interpreter, or I feel like I can manage most situations. But there's still a number of places I wouldn't step foot in. I don't feel comfortable, or if I do go, I want support. And for an agency who's taking on large contracts to be able to sit down with everybody and know what everyone's weaknesses or strengths or growth points are, to think about how that matches with the needs of the request or the entity that they're supplying the interpreters to. I mean, and then talk with them after and what didn't work well. I'm like, who can do that?
Right.
And still make a lot of money. Yeah, it's just one of those things. And I was in that and I didn't so much enjoy it because it took away a lot of my autonomy as well. Like when I would come back and say, I don't like going there.
Yeah.
Like,
What?
well, I had to.
Well, and that's what people have said. Even my husband's like, well, if you just complain about the agencies left and right, why don't you set up your own? And I'm like, oof. Did you also feel that of like, oh, I don't wanna, but I'm gonna because I have to.
You know what? What's funny is that I don't really consider myself a business person.
Same, yeah.
It's not really my thing, but I will read and I will research and I will interview. And back in the day, I had this core group, and we're still kind of a group to this day in different ways. But I came up with the Pam Collins, the Dr. Pam Collins, and the Nicole Schambergers of the world, and we all, just a couple years apart from each other, were in a group. And also we were in a group because there was no other Black people around, so it was kind of like, oh, it was
Mhm.
a natural formation. But at one point when we decided, we were all working for the same agency, and at some point I was the first to leave. I was like the last in, but the first to go. And I was just like, no, I'm making $10. And it wasn't the people. I had a lot of growth experience in the agency, but there was a lot of crap I didn't want to have to do. And I was told I had to do it. Or there was clients I didn't enjoy working with, or consumers that weren't a good fit for me, or vice versa. And I was still told I had to go. And at that point, I remember, and Pam reminded me of this. She's like, I have our notes. Like, we took minute notes at like our little pizza dinners, so get together. And she's like, you wrote this. And it was like, I will run my own agency.
Nice.
I thought that was funny because I don't ever remember saying that. But I do know who I am, and I do know that I like being able to decide for myself.
Yep.
So so apparently I said it sometime in the early 2000s.
I mean, what would your general reaction be? What I always ask agency folks this, or should agencies have regulation? Should there be oversight? And it's hard to regulate a business. I mean, obviously there's certain things you can do, but like this is very nuanced and very what would we regulate? How? Who? All of that. But I just feel like that's one area of frustration for me is like nobody is looking at the agencies except us, the interpreters, who either put up with it or leave.
You know, I mean, it's a very tricky business. I don't mean it to be like dismissive or cheeky. I'm just like, I don't even know what that looks like.
Right. I know.
And I don't think anybody who's asking the question actually knows what that would look like or how
Right.
that would take place. I feel like everyone has to do their part. And like we saw a lot of stuff go down when these VRS companies were trying to shade the government and do all kinds of crazy stuff, and were getting caught and making millions and millions of dollars with
Hmm.
like budget numbers and making up calls and doing all this stuff. And in that way, like when you're doing direct government stuff, yeah, I mean, they have their own regulation, people can shade it, whatever. But when it comes to what we do, it's really it's a nuanced thing when it comes to their understanding of something, what that business needs and who's good for it. And it's an understanding also the consumers and clients of what we do. And there's a big gap there.
Yeah.
They know I just write the request. I just fill out a request. And so y'all send me something. And oh, they're good? Okay, good. Or should I be checking for anything? No. I mean, how else do you get in? How else do we have press conferences with unvetted folks who are interpreting for, what are the, what was that? There was a couple of them. We have the
National
announcement.
weather stuff and people,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, oh, the one where they were who was it? It was in this, I feel like it was a criminal escaped or
Yes,
something else.
something where we were arresting.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So there's all how else does that happen?
Right.
What other profession is this happening in? It's not happening. People are just
Whoops.
like, who knows? I don't know. Can they do it? That looks good to me. So yeah, on some level there should be something, but I don't even know
Right.
what
I
that
think that's
to
the
do
hard
that.
part. I don't
Yeah.
even, someone's got to think about it and then someone's got to act on it. And then someone's got to also know government and policy. Like there's so many layers to things we just don't know. What have you, so you interpret for many years, you run your small agency, your agency gets a little bit bigger. I think the hardest part, if I had to run an agency, wouldn't be the business back end. It'd be having to deal with all these interpreters. Like,
But you
I
said
know
it.
myself and I know all of them, even if they're my friends. So, but
Oh,
like, that
yes.
may be worse. But
Yeah.
what have you, what has it taught you about this field? Or what has it taught you about interpreters?
Yeah, there's things I already knew. Like I don't have a lot of superpowers. I think my big ones are I'm a perceptive person. I'm a perceptive person. I observe. And I'm a really big communicator. I probably over communicate in a lot of instances. And so I was acutely aware of what are some of our issues as a professional group, um, which was one of the reasons that made me kind of nervous about it. And even like I have these conversations with, Kyle, and we'll talk about it because he's in the same position and he does more than me. I just don't have the capacity to do the peopling
Yes.
for some of the stuff that I'm interested in that. But then I go, well, what will it take for me? How much will I have to people? How much more? And the real strength that I have is like um I'm because I'm a good communicator, or I don't know if I think I'm a good communicator, but because I like to communicate, I expect people to be able to communicate. And this is a field in which I find that a lot of interpreters are good at interpreting. They're good at passing along information, but when they have to communicate on their own, um, get the whys and the hows and stuff. There's something where we're missing sometimes off. Not everybody. I am going to generalize a lot through our conversation because I think there's a greater generalization than there are the exceptions. And so the biggest thing for me is having folks who don't know how to express or how to say the why or the how or um, not having some of the introspective abilities, self-awareness,
Mm.
understanding of the holistic approach to what we do and not just the transmission of language.
Even just
And
like the professional behaviors like
well,
that.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think there's some things that we like you, Andrea, you have some things that are inherently who you are. Like some things you didn't have to be taught.
Right.
We all have predispositions, right? So there's some things that I'm predisposed to, and also my environment taught me. And that's true for other people. some not predisposed to certain things, and their environment also didn't teach them. And the only thing you get out of programs, and not to shade programs, because I think we all benefited in some way for those who have done it, is that we're just taught to be the worker. We're just taught to interpret, and disregard everything else. Just go
Yep.
to the factory, sign up, turn your application in for the factory, and just do this. And then you click a link on a website now. Back then it was manual, but like click a link click this box, and then your money goes in, and then you've done it. And that's a big thing that we're missing.
We don't have, I mean, yeah. I mean, they can't cram any more credits into an associate's degree. Like that's the problem. There's no more time. Um, and hopefully you learn it on your practicum. That's
Well, and that's the thing though. It's look, that's a different podcast. Like you this could be a mini, conference session on all the things, because the other thing, and I have to say that becomes problematic, is that depending on, so I was young going into it. I went straight from high school,
same.
right? And so I was already a young person. And depending on where you are, but most of our field are usually second careers folks, and they're coming in usually, mid-range adult, maybe, mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, something like that. And I think it just depends on what your life experience has been. But I think depending on who you are when you come into the program, you think you're going to get the works. You think you're going to leave there as a full interpreter ready to be. That's not what these programs are. And so they show up ready to work,
With your
but they have,
agency.
right, and they have no tools. None. Got some language, no tools. That's the reality of what we're dealing with.
Like a list of missing tools that these workshops are trying to fill, but it's 3 hours on a Saturday. And so I'm like, we can get some tangible things sometimes and leave with actual tools or maybe a contact or like a reference sheet. But it's a practice profession of figuring it out as we go. It's a let's mess up and
For
oh,
100
try
years.
again. Huh?
For 100 years.
It's we've been practicing it. We haven't gotten much. Well, no, we're better at it, but we're still practicing.
Yeah. Yep. And
It's
so, look, that's the hard part, because I I greatly empathize. There were tools I was given at home, or there were tools that I
right.
picked up else that I was able to apply. And because of that, I was like, because I was frustrated about things too. I also the generation, the time which I was coming into the field is very different now. It was completely analog. And you were only going to get experience being on site, being in the location, being around deaf people, and that's also a component that's missing too. We're not socialized in the same way. And everyone is only framing it as a business. That's also can be problematic. So there's the holistic part of what it means is missing. There's a gap somewhere in there. And that's the hard bubble to pop,
But I wouldn't even know where to start. I feel like it's like, where all the problems here, but really the problems back here, but we don't even know how to get back to here. And that's what this podcast has been, as of retracing all the things that we have to get done and don't even know how to start.
Yeah.
Um, you don't think we're as introspective as we think we are? We don't know things about ourselves. And uh,
That really is the big business. Like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't give the secret out, but I feel like what interpreters need, like whisperers. Like, I feel like the majority of a good portion of me, of how I spend my time in this chair, is asking questions to prompt a thought.
yes,
Like, after
yes.
I get oh, it was a horrible day, can you believe it? And I'm like, let's breathe. What was horrible? Well, and we speak very much in generalities. Well, good and bad and exhausting and frustrating, but like, well, what are the things that make those expressions real? What happened? Um, team, like, interpersonal conflict, and the inability to conflict huge.
Well, and I thought of that the other day. I'm like, especially in the freelance world, this is really applicable to that. We aren't in an office every day with Joe and Mary. We are not in these spaces all the time to build relationships, to figure out how each other and problem solve. Me and Tiffany had a job for 3 hours and then we leave. And you've pissed me off in those 3 hours and I got to deal with it or talk about it or leave. Like it's such a weird dynamic that we have in terms of teaming and relationships. And what do you think of them? Oh, okay. Well, then I got to go deal with them. And like it's such a I've told students that I'm like, it's okay to ask about the people you're going to be dealing with, but hold it out here as a grain of salt because that is their view of that person and that situation. And we just have a very strange space to stand in to even build relationships with our colleagues and
It's
talk about
true.
stuff.
And it really, like, I always tell people, like, I am from a family of all girls.
Same.
And I don't, we'll see. And so there's something there about how we are, and we're just chatting. And so there's a lot of things that don't bother me as a person, like,
Right.
or not don't bother me, but I'm like, that's expected. Like, why don't you expect that? And I'm an easily annoyed person, I think, or I'm just kind of like, oh, what, why? Like, because I can work through my stuff. I can talk through it. I understand what's happening, even if I don't do the self-control, even if I don't do the moderation, I still am always aware of what's happening, like most of the time. But I'm also from a family where we fuss and we dance and and I don't like you, get on my face. And then tomorrow we sit down, we talk, we like whatever. And so I'm kind of okay with having issues on the thing. I'm like, why should I don't have an expectation when I walk into an assignment that you and I are going to get along perfectly, have the
Right.
same perspective, work the same way. And I'm like, what is it? I also don't function well in spaces where there's an establishing of like a hierarchy or a level or who's more experienced. And you could be taking the lead today and I could be taking the lead tomorrow, or we could both come into it with equal levels of no understanding. And I think a lot of that plays into it too. Like we're not just thinking about the work at hand, we're also thinking about how we're going to be perceived. If our team can handle a thing and I don't like the way they did that, and I want them to think that I'm the better interpreter. Like there's a lot going
So,
on where it's
so
like,
much.
what are we here for?
Right. I,
So we're doing that. So to say what you said, to answer to what you said, it or just to clap back to it, it is difficult what we do, but I don't think it has to be. I think we're like, I don't know them, I never worked with them. Okay, well, I mean, the problem is that you don't get there early enough. Why don't you get there early enough? Why don't you call them? Why don't you try to set up and establish something? You think actors get to a set who have never worked with each other and then go, oh my God. Yeah, what do? They meet ahead of time, they have coffee, they go stay in the
chemistry, talk about stuff.
get to know each other. Most of us don't want to do that part. So
No.
if we already don't want to do that part,
Yeah.
expect your work experience to reflect it. Like that's just what it is.
Especially now with virtual, we're really not talking.
Oh,
Um,
please.
I'm I've tried to track how many teams reach out to me first, and it's like 1 out of 10 times. Um, what was I gonna say? What were you just saying?
Sorry.
Um, of teaming.
Not knowing them, getting to the
Oh,
place.
well, and you're an over communicator, as am I. And I'm like, I don't know what the problem is if I just like, because I know myself, so I know how to communicate my needs and what I want and what I need. So I don't find a problem when I'm like, well, here's what it is. And then there's no assumptions to be made or no misunderstandings to be had because I laid it out. So that's what I'm expecting from you as well. Um, and the posturing, you say the coming in, I've had a whole thought in my head about posturing because my superpower is intuition and you have a hard shell. I can see right through you. I can see right through your insecurities. And I try to meet it with curiosity and love and care versus, though in here it's highly annoyed. Um, People are where they're at and where they're at. That's okay. But sometimes this is a radical idea. It will piss people off. But I'm like, I want to go, hey, new student who's come in, or new interpreter who's come in all like big. I'll start, even though I've been here for 10 weeks. I'll start, and they tell me about the job, and I'm like, okay. Or others, I want to just be like, I know you're scared. You don't need to be. And I want to just like call out the insecurity. But if they don't know that about themselves, I've ruined a day. I've ruined it and they will hate me.
Yeah.
But
And
man,
talk about that. I think that's the other thing. Like, I'm like, there are times where I'm highly confident, but still nervous because it's a new space or a new topic, or, and I don't think that that's a negative thing. I
right.
think it's like, I'm always going to do the work. So even if I show up and say, hey, I'm feeling this way about it, I'm not going to disappear.
Right.
I'm not going to just like, the worst experience for me is when someone's like, I can't hear you take it. And
Oh my God.
I'm like, well, I'm okay with that if you're a first year.
Right.
Like, and yeah, there's a statute of limitations in which I feel very comfortable because I know that when I was 25, 26 years ago, I was like, and that probably happened. But I'm very uncomfortable with us not being transparent about what our strengths are. When I take a conference, anything like, and I really only take them with Kyle,
Yeah.
because I can say the thing, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. This is not my wheelhouse, but you know I'm gonna show up. You know I'm gonna be professional. You know I'm going to carry my weight, and I'm going to lean in and learn. You
Right.
know, this is the register I'm staying in. This is where I'm comfortable. This is how my production's going to be. If you're comfortable with that, cool. But in a lot of places, interpreters, in a lot of spaces, interpreters don't have one, the ability to communicate that way. And two, they don't know what exactly it is that they need. And so
Yes.
they able to say what it is that they need because they treat every interpreting dynamic like it's the same. And that's also part of the problem of why you don't know why you do need something or don't want something.
Yeah. And we can do all the workshops on teaming, and it's probably not going to make a dent. I mean, at least we'll broach ideas and talk about stuff, but like it's a soft skill, it's a people thing. This is a people business. This humans are crazy and wonderful, and that's why this job is crazy and wonderful. Like I don't yeah, get over yourself is my answer. Um, but and I think
And don't just get over yourself, but know yourself.
yes,
You know,
yes,
because every one of us can name, I mean, you and I are sitting right here and we can name immediately at least one interpreter that we're like, nope.
yeah,
And just when you see their name on the call sheet,
yeah. Great
yeah,
skills, but
fantastic. But that's also something else that I've worked really hard to challenge is that we like to separate their skill
yeah,
from everything else. And I don't believe that that's a holistic interpreter because we're talking about in a very important chunk, but
right.
that is only as important as the situation that they're in.
Because
And
me being all pissy that are a not nice person, or not even not nice, just annoying, or whatever characteristics I don't like about them. Um, Me being about it is not, and they're a great interpreter. Most of the time, I'm like, it's about the message. And if they're a great voicing this stuff, I need you next to me, even though you annoy the shit out of me. Like, we have to care about the work and
sure.
be professionals in that way.
And the work is also the people, right? So like I agree with you in the sense of like when I'm doing the hard skills, if you know how to work with me. Because if you
Right.
don't know how to work with me, I don't want that
It's not
in
going
my
to
ear.
work. Right.
However, that's when you're dealing with that part. But when you mention the soft skills, um, I think it's just as important for me to brush up on my hard skills as it is for you to brush up on your soft skills. And I don't think that those are things that you should parse out. So I've worked with a lot of highly aware deaf professionals who are able to see that. So what do? Okay, she can handle the remarks, but when I go talk to so and so, can you come with me? Well,
Is
that just goes because I can work on that. I can get up. I can get to a place where it might not be equal, but you won't notice much of the difference. But like if they don't trust you in the social spaces,
there
that's also not
clearly
good.
you need to look in of why.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's yes.
yeah,
A
come on.
boundary issue, all of the above.
Yeah.
And so we touch on a lot of stuff, and we briefly talked before this episode of like, I'm doing these episodes, I'm doing these podcasts, and some of the remarks I'm getting is like, you're being so edgy. And I'm like, am I? I don't think I'm being edgy in any sort of way. I'm talking about the stuff that we're already talking about in parking lots. I'm just saying it into a microphone vulnerably, and people resonate with it because it's happening. And I think a lot you do the same on Instagram and in different ways. People appreciate your insight because you say the thing. And what you said earlier, you say the thing that invokes then more thinking on that person's part. You're not out here giving answers and saying this is how you should and I know everything at all. Um, but you say the thing and make people think. Um, and you did this with Terp Tappin with Paris. I have used your one pager of why we need a 2 hour minimum for VRI for virtual work for so many things. I just send it to people. Yes, because you put into words what we all were thinking. Um, and then speaking of the team that may leave you with the microphone, you wrote a few articles for Street Leverage in
Mhm.
2013 and 2018 and all of that. So I just
Frust-
think,
frustrated expression.
and that's what births most of these things
Mhm.
is you've hit your head against a brick wall so many times. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, I gotta do something about this.
yeah.
Um, what so a lot of the things that come from these episodes is a battle cry of me going, come on, others. We need y'all. We need everybody to do something. Not everybody's gonna want to do a podcast. Not everyone's gonna want to be Instagram live or write articles. What would you say to folks then of like, well, what can they do? What people ride that out for 20 years, ride that CICT or that whatever certification NAD 5 for 40 years. I just am like, I feel the urge of more from folks and I feel it's happening.
It's in waves, right? Like we're able to utilize something that I think, okay, how do I want to say this? Because I have to interpret for myself. So let me make sure
Yes.
that I want to be a little bit more thoughtful. um the technology capabilities that we have now to be able to, which has really impacted the deaf community as well. And it's been a huge resource for us because the way these mediums are utilized now, we get more access to everything. And that's the huge plus of this
Yes.
current time that we're living in. Um, Despite all of the cons it can have, this is a huge plus, and that I'm grateful. I can practice at any given moment, do deliberate practice by just opening the internet.
Yep.
Have access to natural raw language from across the US and internationally. So the technological aspect um, now I think is lending itself for people to feel more comfortable having a voice or hosting something or doing something. And then we have a great portion of our professional membership that is still from a past generation or two in which these things are foreign. You only got together in person. You only did these things, and that's how real learning happens. And that's not the case. And so part of, I think, the hesitancy is that people are not comfortable using a technological medium or unfamiliar with it, scared of it.
Mhm.
Um, and so not really sure how to utilize it. And that's why I think we see so few. We also see so few because those that are comfortable using it haven't amassed the experience.
Yes.
Just haven't been doing this long enough to feel comfortable in. So they're used to being in the critique seat where they criticize everything, but they haven't amassed that ability to express or the experience to be able to add to having a conversation, which is why I love Turk Tapping, because Paris and I are a decade or more apart.
Yep.
And so the things that we would talk about would start with him asking me a question about, well, how, and then me saying, well, what about this? And then me getting the perspective of what someone in his seat is thinking as a recent grad, or how things are looking and how do I get this experience? And so that exchange was like, oh, great. This would be a great conversation with two people who get along really well and actually have a lot of, not always the same, but similar outlook and perspective. However, two different, we've been doing it like this. And so that overlap and share has really helped us as individuals. As much as it's been fun, it is fun to do it for the masses. It's also been a growth, and I think we also don't have that generational share. It's this generation looks at this generation a certain way, that generation looks at that generation a certain way. And so there's no cross sharing. And because of that, then you add the technology to it. I think and people are scared to be honest about what we go through.
Well, and you had made this comment before, and wrote it down that for years, or even now still, maybe that's why people are like, oh, you're talking on a podcast. We didn't talk about the work that the way we talk about the work. Not once in these episodes, I thought about it for a long time. I'm like, will I ever come ever dangerously close to violating any ethical issue or CPC? Will I bring up examples to ever, I don't ever want to come close to that. I, me or guests have never, I'm sure Interp happened too. Like, you're not really, we don't even go anywhere near that, right? We can talk about this work in so many different ways, but talking about the work in a public way, or even just more than just the one interpreter friend you had, is changed. That the way we talk about the work and how much we talk about it is
We're we're
definitely
getting
changed.
we're getting a little bit, like I said, it's this current generation, the younger generation in the field, what they are accustomed to and how that's allowing voices to be heard. And I don't think we do it really well yet. We're still in that seat of being like, ooh, should you? Ooh, I can't believe. And like you said, I think there's also an assumption of an ethical boundary being crossed before it actually
Yep.
is crossed, without it being crossed, because we're actually bringing visibility to things. And but I think it's so much more productive to have the conversations, um, because if not, we're going to keep saying we're a young profession for the next 200 years, and it's like, well, I mean, how? Even I'm tired of hearing that, like, oh, we're
Yep.
just so young. I'm like, yeah, but we also are not progressive. We also are not trying to be different. And the only time we ever pop out is when everyone wants to amass on one person to criticize and hold them up as a bad example. That is the only time we really come together and thought. And even if the thoughts
Yay.
differ, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But no one's really like actively, proactively trying to have these conversations. And I think like even this is revolutionary, like just speaking English,
I know. I it was
that's another thing.
Tiffany was the person on my list to call when I said I have this idea. And Keisha and Kyle. I was like, I have this idea. I need you to give me the verbiage and the courage to speak English
Yeah.
on a podcast that's a very audible based hearing podcast, is a very hearing thing. And I'll do everything in my power to make it accessible in every way. Um, yeah,
It is what it is.
it
It is,
is.
it's funny, like because when you called, it's the same thing that Paris and I went through. And I said, well, when you and I talk, we have these conversations in English.
Yes.
We are multilingual people. And so there's times where we feel comfortable expressing something in a second or third language but when we sit down and say, hey, can I call you real quick? It's happening in that way. And so the most authentic expression to give to viewers and listeners is that natural way that we communicate in our first native language. And we got all kinds of emails and DMs,
I'm
just like,
sure.
and it didn't even matter. Like ours, has interpreters. Everything we did with it was intentional. You
Right.
know, we're Black and brown people. We wanted to showcase that. We wanted to give interpreters who are not comfortable taking like legit jobs virtually to have an opportunity to work in a medium where they could kind of get used to and use tech and all the things and whatever. And I remember getting one or two, well, we got more than that, but specifically interpreters
That.
saying your podcast is not accessible. Well,
Mm,
actually it is. It's very, oh, why is it not conducted in ASL? Well, we already said, we tell you that at the outset, like why it's not, but we provide access. Well, and there was just this pushback, and I said, well, what do you do? What do you do for a living? What do you do? You provide language access. So the interpreters on the lives provide language access. How is that different than what you do on a regular basis? And are you saying that the interpreters are not understandable? Like what, tell me what the
right.
thing is.
Right.
So it's just a very interesting that like I understand, I'm not upset because I understand that I believe the place in which they say it is
Right.
coming a good place. However, even in that moment, they don't know how to have the conversation about it. All they can do is say, you're wrong. Well,
Well,
why?
right.
Well, you're not using yourself. I know this, and
That's all the
keep
feedback I got.
keep
You
coming.
absolutely. Yep. Absolutely need a deaf person on every one. And I'm like, do I though? Like our work, obviously they're integral to every job we do because we have a job because of them. But yeah, I'm like, but the things we talk about, I asked so many deaf friends and they're like, the common answer I got was like, I don't care. I don't care what you guys talk about. I don't want to know. Y'all are just interpreting. I don't care.
I'd
I'm
say
like, that.
that is
But
the majority.
I also have a note that you like in terms of like the way we talk about the work, you used to cringe being identified as the interpreter. Like we used to be very hidden. We are not here. We are invisible. And now like being a human is okay, which is great that we are a human in this space. We have an energy, we have a bias, all of that to acknowledge. Um, which shifted in our career.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but sometimes that shift gets a little wild and
Sure, for
people
sure. The pendulum is always like,
yes, never land in the middle.
but it's I've always but I and even in me saying that, I feel like that was internalized because I was taught to feel that way about myself, or I
Yes.
was taught to consider myself in this way, or not to consider myself in a certain way. And so I just repeated, which I see happen too.
Yep.
I just repeated language that was taught to me. You are to be quiet. You're not visible. No one can see you. I'm like, oh wow, no one can see me, but why are they all talking to me? Oh my God, what am I gonna, oh my goodness. Um, and they came with time because I was, like I said, I've always been a self-aware person. So it always felt uncomfortable for me to go into a place when someone said hi to me and just be like, why, why am I not greeting another person?
You
Why am I
interpret
pretending
them.
like they're not there? Well,
Right.
I think they know. And I also felt like it really undermined and didn't give an opportunity to the hearing people in the space who were non-signers to be educated.
Right.
Um, and there are some things like it is a symbiotic relationship. We have the deaf professional and us in this space. So we are a team at all times. And so we should lean into each other's experiences, understandings. And so like if there's a time, well then you go ahead. I love the deaf professionals who are like, this is yeah, you got this for sure. But then like, oh, you should please go ahead. Please let them know. Yes, thank you.
Communication.
Thank you.
Communication.
And also makes them aware. I have an opportunity to educate in that moment, which makes my job easier instead of all day trying to stay in the bathroom for 30 minutes. Like, what are we doing? Like, I'm in the space. They can see me, obviously.
Well, and it just makes our job harder in that regard of the interactions, but also the interpreting. I'm very transparent about the process. If I'm lost, if wait a minute. So what did you say? Like, this is a job that's going through my brain. I'm not AI. I'm not perfect. So you're going to have to slow down just a little bit and you're going to have to speak up a little bit more. Like, I think it's okay that we need those things to make sure this whole process happens. Um, and if we are friendly in a customer service human field, then those things will all happen a little bit easier. And we're not just that weird interpreter who won't say anything. Yeah, it's
Put your head down. It's like, what's going on? It is a very weird, and I will say, like, I had this experience because I used to do a lot of the mentoring with the Gallaudet students. And every year, yeah, I can say this. So, they hold job fairs, open types of orientations and things on campus. But I remember I had a few students that particular job fair or whatever, and they rotated them and so they could have experience to work and have some oversight, whatever. Very normal setting. And the booths, these job fair booths are often like 90% of them are run by the hearing individuals that work in HR, whatever, at these companies. And I get a student with me, and they're just, I mean, dead, waiting for people to pass by. Meantime, the hearing HR person, the company rep, is like, "Hey, so does anything I need to know?" And they are just, the student is deadlocked. I'm
that's part
just,
of our job too, though, is
I'm
to
like, and so I said, "What are you doing?" Well, I can't talk to them unless a deaf person is here. Well, then how do you prepare for your job? And I
right.
understand there was a larger, and if anyone who's never worked on Gallaudet campus, there's a larger element to this that I don't need to go into, but that fed into their comfortability and fed into whether they felt they could make the decision. All they knew is that this is a hearing person, I'm in a deaf environment, and therefore I can't talk to them. And I was like, you will never be successful and you will never have what you need if you only wait for the deaf person to show up to communicate. This is part of your foundational prep, and they're willing to give it to you. And also, it's very isolating. How do you think they're going to communicate with the deaf people that come up based on you
Right.
alone? Those are wild, gnarly concepts that people we're not taught. If that's the case, we might as well just go back to conduit. We might as well just not even be people. Then that's how you're operating. And you think you're being progressive.
We're
That is not,
professional. And
yeah,
that's,
or
yeah.
professional. Yeah, that's not professional. That is so unprofessional. They're like, hello, hello. You're like, mm-mm,
They're your
mm-mm.
client too. Like we often forget that
Yes,
it's taken
yes,
a lot of years for me to practice my customer service toward the hearing community, toward the other folks of the canned answers, the things I should say, how I say it, when I redirect, when I clarify. Like that is a practice. But you're right, it's bore into you in your ITP of don't you dare, don't you step in front of. And I'm like, I feel like it's becoming more realistic, hopefully. But yeah, those are the missing pieces you mentioned, the
I'm,
tools.
I'm wondering if it is getting better. And the reason why I say that is because as the world turns, and just like with COVID, which could be a whole nother another podcast, which is like a lot of things have shifted and changed. There have been some positives, absolutely. But I think in our ability to engage, no. I don't feel like that's gotten any better. In fact, I think that has declined because we've also neglected to really address and support this whole group of interpreters who came up specifically during a time period in which we were only working in this box, and to put them back, to now put them in, not back in, put them in the analog real world and have to navigate these spaces without these tools, or not being able to practice them or witness them. And if they're only working with other people, one, if they're only working alone, or if they're only working with other people who also have yet to sharpen these skills, and understand how effective they are in these professional spaces.
Good luck.
Yeah, yeah. It's a challenge.
It is. A few more questions before we wrap up. I state this in like the intro of this episode of kind of the impetus and the reason for all of this is I've noticed in the 20 years I've worked that deaf people are skyrocketing past interpreters, just in terms of degrees, places and spaces that we are entering as interpreters, because deaf people traditionally weren't in those spaces, but now are. Um, and we aren't keeping up.
Yeah.
Um, how can we solve it all? Um,
Yeah. Is that a
because I
question?
don't, that's the question. Because I don't have a PhD in what this amazing deaf person has a PhD in. And that's totally understandable that we can't find Joe who also knows it. Like, I think that predicament's going to only get more. And so, because the education of deaf people and the places they go, yeah, just a statement, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's good food for thought. I mean, look, I think part of it is, right, there's not, I don't, it won't happen. Like, there's not
Right.
enough. We're not gonna we're generalists for the most part. Few of us specialize in some areas, but we're generalists, like in the Army, like a general. We're good at a bunch of stuff. We don't master many things. And I'm okay with that because I am one of those type of people who prefers to be able to do quick downloads, for that particular thing. And most of the stuff that they're doing or certain spaces I work in, I don't want to be an SME on this, not interested. But for that 2 days, for those 3 days or whatever, I can do the best I can. But I think part of it is that it's the education can happen outside of the formula we're used to, right? And so got to read, you've got to expose yourself to different environments and people and language. I think about myself being from DC and the things that I had to do as an intern, the spaces I had to work in. I was working in the federal government at 2021 interpreting, and the deaf people, although there weren't like a plethora, I was interpreting for folks who were the supervisor in this department
Mm.
or was the manager of this
Was
or
a rarity. DC's that
right.
special.
Correct. And so for me, I was always like doing this because that was my everyday.
Right.
And so I do understand it being from a place where that's not, which might mean you have to position yourself in a place where you can get exposed. But it also requires you to do like your education should never end just because you're not in school. And it doesn't have to be dependent upon being in a classroom or getting that degree. You can be a couch scholar. You can be a person who is versed because you choose to be.
Or
And
it doesn't always have to be what CEUs come through your email.
correct,
What
exactly.
workshops for your eyebrows come through. Like I'm just there's I don't know.
Yeah. It's just that they are as diverse as we are. And maybe you haven't had the ability to be exposed to that. Um, but you can prep for that in any kind of way without having lived it specifically. And that makes for really good journalists. I think, we all love a good primary care physician, even if they can't do surgery on us. But we know when one's lousy and is just phoning it in and looking at the book, and we know one who really knows how to do the thing or has more knowledge beyond what just giving you a prescription. So I laud the generalists, but we have to do work all the time.
Because we're in so many spaces.
Yeah.
What would you leave people with just from everything we talked about, or what's something you always like to impress upon newer interpreters or everybody? You always have good tidbits on Instagram and whatnot, and I'm sure they're spurred from a moment, but like
Right.
what do you like to always emphasize to folks or make sure people take away?
I think based on a couple of recent conversations that I've had, I think, and something that came up during this conversation, which is just humanizing everything. And I think that might sound a little like crunchy, but I think at the end of the day, if you remember that we are all human, and that goes for everybody. Like you said, sometimes we have a tendency to disregard or disengage with the hearing clients and consumers. Like everybody is human, yeah. And the having expectations based on being human and offering to people what you expect to receive. And I find that is one of my biggest peeves, where there always seems to be this high expectation for Andrea, but then when I'm up on the chopping block, I'm like, "Ah, I want all these concessions."
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't allow you to really to understand the people that you're working with. And I think we do so much better when we can look at everybody as an individual and assess what is needed in the moment. So that's my big thing right now. Like he said, okay, but what do we? So what do we do now?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, so he did that. Oh, he made you upset. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, don't your
Now
brothers
what?
and sisters, and your mom and your dad and your uncles like? Yeah, you got to work through that stuff. Humanize it. What would you want someone to do for you? How would you want someone to help you navigate the situation? Be a giver and not just a taker.
Yeah. Nice. Yay. Um, we could go forever. What I ask folks at the end of episodes to highlight a deaf owned business or a deaf influencer or a deaf organization. Which one do you want to highlight for us today?
Mhm. That's a hard one. I did put a
I
few
know.
there. But I do like, I think because I've been watching him lately, is ASL Pinnacle.
Oh, I mean,
Um, and I love language. And I love people who play with language who also teach. So I learn signs,
yes.
I learn expressions, I learn approaches. So it's my current one. Like I just DM'd him the other day and was like, "Hey, have you thought about doing this? Because I love when you do this." He hasn't replied yet. We got like, okay, but I get excited when I see people who are putting out content that can be discussed and
Yes.
analyzed. So that's my current favorite right now.
ASL Pinnacle. I love when he does the sentence in novice, intermediate,
Yes.
advanced, and deaf. I'm like,
Yeah.
that helps my interpreter brain
Yeah.
go, where do I fall on that? Or what
Yes.
can I steal from all of
Yes.
these pieces? I
Yeah.
love those. And it helps
Yeah.
students to see, yes, you're signing the things, but how can
Right.
you? Yes, I love it. I love it.
And that's language, right? I love watching language do this, be fluid, and also when you can see your own progression through it. So yeah, so that's my current favorite.
Love
I
it.
haven't learned. I like to see the new stuff he puts out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure people want to hear more. But yeah, I really appreciate your time and your wisdom and your words. So thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this. I think it's going to be what we need. And I think also too, it's gonna create creativity. Like with Keisha's, with Tap In, with this, I feel like it's just when we see each other, it also gives us greater ideas
Yeah,
to how to have different conversations. So I appreciate it. This is gonna be in classrooms. So
it'll be awesome. And I've already got a CDI friend who's like, I'm going to let you get started and then you're going to teach me everything and I'm going to start a CDI one. I'm like, yes, like that's
Oh,
exactly
we
what we need.
need that.
Yeah, I
We
want
need
to peer
that.
in on your
Yes.
conversation.
No,
Yes.
we need that.
So awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrea.